Hey everybody, how we doing today, my glorkles schmorkles? Today we're going over a tweet from Riot on the current state of gameplay balance. Unfortunately, that's probably not the most interesting topic for many of you, getting into the more nitty-gritty stuff. So of course we're going to be showing gameplay in front, and hopefully we don't take too long for this video so you can just watch some good games I had, kind of showing how overpowered Profane Hydra is as we go over this tweet. So as I said, this is on the current gameplay balance of some different champions and general concepts like that. So first up, Aurelion Sol was extraordinarily overpowered, coming in at a 57% win rate, making him one of the most overpowered champions of all time. Certainly within the top 100 most broken patches or champions ever, maybe even in the top 50, but I don't really know. Anyway, he was extraordinarily overpowered. What did I have to say about this? Asol are bad on this one. Clearly we overshot on balance and we own that. Post nerf, we still believe Asol is stronger than pre-buff though. The impetus for the changes was honoring the desire of Asol players to be rewarded for proactivity in lane. But we realized post-ship that rewarding this with fragging power from W was too stat checking and resulted in poor gameplay. So basically they're saying they allowed Asol to stack on opponents rather than stack primarily on minions. But then they also buffed him to do more damage while in his W, so when he's breathing while moving, right? And that made him extraordinarily overpowered. So they brought those numbers way back down and just let him stack on opponents, which is kind of his, what do you even want to call it? His gameplay fantasy. They want Asol players to stack up on his Q, right? But they don't want people gliding in on Asol and absolutely obliterating tanks and squishies and everybody in like 2 seconds, okay? We're open to being wrong and that Asol players prefer a more passive style, but that's the reasoning for the changes at least, and we'll monitor from here. So basically they wanted Asol to stack on opposing champions, they didn't want him to stack on minions. So they nerfed his ability to stack on minions and buffed his ability to stack on opposing champions. I'm gonna be honest, I normally try not to be, well, I try anyway. I try not to be as mean as I really feel like, but oh my god, there is literally, if you looked back at the patch, if you guys watch my patch video and now you're watching this, there is literally, and I mean literally, there is literally no way that Riot looked at these changes and fully understood Asol's kit and thought that this wasn't going to make him overpowered. I looked at his numbers, I understood generally the kit, I looked at his win rates, his pick rates, stuff like that, and you guys saw me, I went over it, there was absolutely no way whatsoever these changes ever should have gone through. This was a disaster. This, I don't, like, the only thing I can think of is they literally did not understand the game. Like, fundamentally, they didn't understand Asol's kit. I don't understand at all. Something's screwed up here, but I have nothing more to say here on this. The only problem here I have with their balancing changes here, I feel like it's too much balanced on whether or not Asol can actually hit opponents. So for example, Azir, Orianna, they just need to farm up and get items and they're fine, right? So like they can kill champions, they can kill minions, either way they do great. If Asol needs to stack primarily by hitting opposing champions, this means that against bad players, he will tend to stack more. Now this is a problem because Asol already tends to do good at the low ranks and he tends to do worse at the high ranks, okay? And the problem here, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I'm saying there's a possibility that's happening. I'm saying that there's a possibility now that we're going to have his win rate higher at the low rank and lower at the high rank, even more so. So maybe, Riot doesn't really like champions going beyond 52% win rate, right? So if he's 52% win rate at the low ranks, he might be like 48% at the high ranks with his current balancing. Now, I'm not saying that will happen. It's just my thoughts. Elai. She's looking pretty strong, but not strong enough for her to be hotfixed. Elai is one of those champs who benefits more from play against that requires relearning. So we'll monitor if she gets weaker over time. Okay. So what they're talking about here is they're saying with the increased range on Elai's tentacles, to remind everybody, Elai does slightly less damage, but her tentacles reach longer. What they're saying is that they think that she might be getting a lot of win rate from people not suspecting her tentacles will reach that long. And as people get more used to her over time, her win rate might shoot back down. And so they're saying they're not going to hotfix her, but what they will do is, if her win rate goes down over time, you know, they're not going to nerf her as hard, right? Like, they don't want to, oh my god, day one, everybody was getting hit by her tentacles, and then, you know, they hyper nerf her, and then everybody gets used to the longer tentacle range, and suddenly she's useless. So I think that's probably reasonable. I think that's probably, yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with that. That's probably fine for that. Maokai, he's looking strong for sure and still went down on the patch, but similar to Elai, not strong enough to hotfix. He'll be adjusted next patch though. Okay, so unlike Elai, there's really nothing to relearn against Maokai. They redid a bunch of numbers and they didn't nerf him hard enough, which I suspect that everyone kind of guessed at, right? Like, the dude needed to lose like at least, you know, 3% win rate, 5 at the most, and they did like a 1% win rate nerf. I get where they were going, but the problem is Maokai just W's an enemy, walks forward, Qs, and it knocks him into his AD carry, and then his AD carry gets a kill, which makes the laning phase, he's just very, 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 very strong as a support. At this point, I'm not really sure what they could do to fix that. It just seems like, you know, I'm not really sure what they could do to fix that, right? Fundamentally, like, he's just extraordinarily powerful at being a support right now. And I'm not really sure if Riot or anyone can do anything to fix that. Okay. Wukong top is still not looking particularly strong. I went over this in my previous video. If you guys watch it, though, like, none of you guys clicked on it. Wukong top barely got touched. In fact, I'm gonna be honest with you, it actually does look potentially does look like Wukong top is despite being buffed, that the Sundering Sky nerfs, well, for him they were nerfs. For some Sundering Sky got more HP but lost damage. For some champions that's a buff, for some champions that's a nerf. And for Wukong, it looks like it was a nerf on him. And so the problem seems to be that his Q was buffed, his E was buffed, but it kind of equalizes out with Sundering Sky. I've talked about this in the past. Wukong needs to kill people, right? Like, he can't fight long fights, he needs to actually kill you, right? Over a very long fight, he tends to be weaker than other champions, right? And so the problem is that by making it more survivable, but by lowering its damage, Wukong is now put in a position where his fights end up being longer, where he doesn't do as good. At any rate, yeah. Top is still not looking particularly strong. We approached it pretty conservatively, but because range changes can be pretty impactful. No planned follow-up changes here, as he's still stronger, but need to think about things that are good for top that don't buff jungle up a lot. So I do agree with that. Remember when they made Trundle's Q 25 more range, and that massively buffed his win rate, right? I shouldn't say massively. It went up by like 1 to 2%, right? And so Riot probably looked at the Wukong Q changes and thought, oh, maybe that'll give him a 1 to 2% win rate increase too, right? I didn't think it was going to, but, you know, that's their thought. They were thinking, okay, well, we don't want to buff him like too much, and then, oh my god, he's like 57% win rate, like Asol. That would never happen, in my opinion. But I guess I can agree with their thoughts on the matter. But I think the problem with this line of thought is it's too flowcharty, I guess. If range increase, then power increase dramatically, right? But it doesn't look into the particulars of, like, is this what Wukong top needed? Does this make him viable? Does this make him strong? It didn't really look into the specifics of, like, well, I guess Wukong top, right? Like, you know, decent change, but, you know, okay. Yeah, it just, I don't know. I don't really have anything else to say here. As for the buffs, so they want to buff Wukong top, but they don't want to buff Wukong jungle. That's going to be pretty hard to do. I mean, obviously, like, how do you buff him for top in a way that doesn't buff him for jungle? I guess part of my problem here is, once again, I'm kind of like, about buffing Wukong top at all. Until they give him some gameplay beyond EQ, RQ, RQ, right? It's pretty hard for a lot of champions to deal with that, and it's a pretty frustrating thing if he is strong like that, because again, it's just EQ, RQ, RQ. A champion with 2 gap closers, 2 knockups, right? Large armor shred, good percent health damage. You know, a champion like that tends to be very frustrating for a lot of people to fight. So I guess just for me, I'm like, you know, maybe we shouldn't be buffing Wukong top that hard. Maybe I guess it could be viable, but I'm just, I'm looking at this, I'm like, maybe we shouldn't. Okay. Damage. We still need to see more info to see how proc damage changes play out. Though we still have intentions to reduce damage to squishy champions back to around durability patch values if this doesn't move the needle a lot. We also have plans to get some squishy building champions like Galio, Silas, etc. onto more health-oriented builds. Let's talk about this, and this will probably be what I spend the majority of this video on, because we need to actually talk about this, right? There is a legitimate problem here going forwards, okay? As you see in these videos, and I have chosen these clips, I've chosen this specifically. Now, I might go into this further in a different video on its own, right? But I really need to talk about this in particular. Two things. Damage is still too high, and that's because, as you go into the second issue, a lot of champions who are supposed to be building tanky are instead building really squishy. Why is that? They cite Galio and Silas, two AP champions, but they're ignoring the fact that lots of AD champions are opting into lethality builds rather than building bruiser builds. Now that would be fine, and I think Riot did think that some things like that would happen, but the problem here is that bruiser items as a whole are just clearly not doing as good as pure damage builds, and we're seeing in AP champions kind of the same problem. There's two culprits right now, and you guys have heard me talk about these a lot. One is Profane Hydra. Two is Lichbane. For the past, I don't even know, like week, 2, 3, 4, a month. For the past month, these two items have been blatantly overpowered and have blatantly been dominating the meta. Lichbane does way too much damage, and Profane Hydra does way too much damage. Because Profane Hydra scales really hard on AD, and Lichbane scales really hard on AP, this means that once you build these items, there's really no point in building, tanky anymore. You just stack more and more damage into them, and you just try to one-shot harder and harder and harder. And that's just kind of been how things have been going. You just try to one-shot harder and harder and harder because you already have the capability of doing it, right? Let's talk specifically about lethality, because obviously I play. You're watching me play right now. Presumably I've edited it well enough so you understand that I at the very least I understand what's going on here. Okay, let's talk about Profane Hydra here. Riot. Okay, let's talk about what's happening here. Okay, the problem is lethality increases all your physical damage, and again, I've showed you guys the math. It's by about 10 to 11%, about there, depending on how much armor the opponent has, stuff like that, right? Now, the problem is, the more lethality you have, the better lethality is. And this goes especially much because Riot decided that Cyrilda's Grudge should scale on lethality. So the more lethality you have, the better Cyrilda's Grudge is. What are we seeing? Now a lot of champions are going, well, I built one lethality item, might as well keep going. Might as well keep going more and more and more and more into lethality. The issue here is when champions who previously were trying to build tank-ish, or at the very least building more of like a hybrid kind of sort of tanky build. I'm not saying pure tank, I'm not saying going to tank items, but at the very least going like with the more tanky AP items, or maybe going with the more tanky, bruiser builds. The problem is when these champions start building into the pure damage, instead of having a tanky champion who's, soaking up hits, you just have another champion who's trying to funny one-shot people, right? And so you're taking away tankiness from the game, and you're adding more damage into the game. Specifically, let's look at Profane Hydra. What exactly is causing this item, in my opinion, to break the game so hard and causing so many people to default into this item and build this item and kind of abuse, let's call it, this item? Profane Hydra gives damage, lethality, and ability haste, and good amounts of each. 60 damage, 18 lethality, 20 ability haste. 20 ability haste. This means that the only item in the game that gives more potential ability haste than Profane Hydra is Spear of Sojin. Spear of Sojin has been struggling to see its own viability because it's a backloaded damage item, which is, yes, that is becoming one of the issues that Riot is doing. The bruiser items right now are pretty backloaded. Black Cleaver takes time to stack up. Spear Ocean takes time to stack up, and if you have easy ways to stack these items instantly, they can do okay, but not every champion does. Profane Hydra just comes out and it gives you 18 lethality and boom. So let's compare Profane Hydra to Spear Ocean, okay? Like his first items, because I think in Riot's mind, they thought that Spear Ocean was going to be like a good bruiser item for bruisers who use abilities, blah, 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 and it just hasn't been. So let's compare. Spear Ocean adds 12% damage to only your abilities after you stack it up. You need 4 different procs to stack it up. Profane Hydra adds 10 to 11% physical damage just because you built the item, and that's forever. Spear Ocean gives health and, well, it gives the ability haste, right? Which is good. Profane Hydra gives the Giga active that does a lot of damage. Despite Spear Ocean adding 300 health, over time, and I'm sure many of you have probably noticed this, Profane Hydra is potentially later in the game doing 300 damage on its active even after armor and magic resist. As champions start reaching 300, even 400 base damage, potentially they can have, with Hubris or Conqueror or Aatrox ult, Riven ult, stuff like that. Profane Hydra, especially because, again, you can have Serylda's Grudge, when you have 50 lethality and 26% armor pen, your opponents are not left with that much armor, particularly squishy champions. They did say here, they did mention squishy champions. They want these squishy building champions, right, to be building into these tankier items, but I think this is kind of a problem with how Profane Hydra and Lichbane work. Every mage stacks Magic Pen, and then Profane Hydra makes you stack lethality. So often in the opposing team, you will have one dude is stacking lethality, another dude is stacking Magic Pen. So you have one item for armor, one item for magic resist, and maybe a third item on Jack Show. And now with these 3 items, you can start to survive through all, the magic burst champion and the physical burst champion. Or alternatively, you can just play Kled, stack all lethality items, and one-shot people. You can play Aatrox, stack lethality, and one-shot people. You can play these champions and just go funny one-shot. And that just seems to be the more ideal way to play out the game. Profane Hydra, particularly being so good early game, I'm not really sure what this item is supposed to be doing. What is Profane Hydra, right? I guess, what is this item even supposed to be doing anymore, right? Like, so it gives wave clear, good. It gives an active with burst, okay. It gives lots of ability haste and damage and lethality, and it scales really good, and it's good on the rush. So let's go back to the Spear Ocean comparison. Spear Ocean can give 12% damage to only your abilities after you stack it up. Profane Hydra gives 10 to 11% on all physical damage forever. The health that Spear Ocean has eventually will start to be surpassed by Profane Hydra, because Profane Hydra will start actually doing more damage on the active, right? Profane Hydra leads into better builds. Spear Ocean doesn't. And let's remember here, Spear Ocean has to be stacked up. That's a problem here, right? You have to stack Spear Ocean up. What is my reward for these back-loaded items? Seriously, what is my reward for these back-loaded items? So I stack up Spear Ocean, I stack up Black Cleaver, and oh wait, is my opponent dead? Probably. So why didn't I just kill them? For those first 4 abilities from Spear Ocean, I was stacking up the damage. But wait, Profane Hydra just killed them. So you're going to struggle here, is my response to this. You're going to struggle to make these champions like Galio, like Silas, as you just listed, to start to build more health builds unless you just make them blatantly overpowered. Now, you could do that. You can make Rade just blatantly overpowered. You could make all these defensive items blatantly overpowered, right? But I think the fundamental problem here is you can't have these items like Lichbane, and you can't have these items like Profane Hydra that are extremely good in the rush, have really weird design intent, scale really good by just continuing to build complete squishy, right? Like Lichbane, good at bursting people down, good at killing turrets, good in a rush, good late game, good all game. Really, there's no downside to Lichbane, right? Profane Hydra, it's just good at everything, and it also gives wave clear, so you can obliterate waves and then go on to massacring turrets, which I think I showed you on Colette earlier. It just, this whole situation just seems to be bad to me. And I feel like for Riot that they didn't, oh geez, what's the way to put this? You haven't thought this through properly. You have designed build paths, right? So like you see the Lich Bane into full AP, but then here's the problem. Okay, here's the problem. Mages that go Deathcap, Hourglass, Void Staff. They go that every single game without fail, right? They go Lich Bane. I now have 4 items, right? That are locked in. So there's only 1 item that hasn't been locked in so far. Now, that 1 item that hasn't been locked in, I guess the question is, how are you going to get these champions to lock in an item that goes to survivability? And how are you going to get them to not just go Lich Bane into funny one-shot combo, right? Now, for some champions, it doesn't work, but for a lot of champions, it is working because you have pushed Lich Bane. You've pushed Lich Bane so hard that even its core users, they're not the only people building anymore. Now we're starting to see it again on Galio, on Silas, and yeah. Okay. So what I'm just saying here is we're going to need to do a lot of work, and I really think the 2 big enablers of the funny one-shot builds, Lich Bane and Profane Hydra, Riot really needs to think of some serious nerfs onto these items, and they need to do it soon because, you know, again, earlier in the season, we were seeing lots of people doing Bruiser builds. We were seeing lots of people doing, you know, Banshee's Veil, more tanky builds, but that's gone. As people have min-maxed out the pure damage builds, we're seeing that that's all anybody is doing anymore. We're just seeing pure damage build, pure damage build, pure damage build. And that's causing so much damage inflation. I know you guys are saying, oh, time to kill is lower. I don't know where you guys are getting that information, but it's time to kill is not lower. I don't know who's telling you guys that time to kill is lower, but I assure you, you know, just look at these clips, right? Like I'm playing Aatrox and Kled. These are 2 champions not really known for just hyper one-shotting. Okay, Aatrox in certain metas, yes, but again, you guys also did say that you were going to end the Aatrox funny one-shot build, and yet competitively, Aatrox funny one-shot build is dominant. Now in solo queue, due to the changes to Sundered Sky, now we're even seeing solo queued. Aatrox funny one-shot build is dominant. So that's all I have to say on this damage issue. You know, think of something here because, you know, as time goes on, more and more people are going to funny one-shot build, which is not the most fun way to play the game. So there we go. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, everybody. As always, I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Goodbye, everybody.